Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today in this video we're going to take a look at Serverless 360 and we're going to be looking at a comparison of business activity monitoring and Azure logs. So we're going to be looking at our enterprise integration platform today, and the area we're going to be looking at is over in the monitoring area. So we're going to look at Serverless 360, log analytics, and then this is part of the bigger suite, so it also kind of includes Azure Monitor and Application Insights. But we're going to be looking at a Logic Apps solution over here today, and how we can use both BAM and log analytics, and how Serverless 360 can help you regardless of which approach that you're taking. So the use case here is about shifting the support left. So instead of having our developers and our Azure experts over here being maxed out with too many support cases escalating, they're doing lots of triage where support users and business users just don't have the visibility to be able to do anything with an issue. So these get escalated up, and it takes time, it costs money, and it means developers aren't focused on delivering new solutions. So there's two modules in Serverless 360. So we've got business applications, which is about letting a support person be able to see what's going on in an Azure component. And in this example, we're going to look at how we can use log analytics from Logic Apps and show some of the features that you can take advantage of there. And then we're also going to look at business activity monitoring and show how we can allow self-service for level 1 support people and business super users. So the solution that we're going to look at is this one here. So each day we'll get a trigger event, which will kick off a Logic app. That Logic app is going to call down to success factors and get the details of our employees and the benefits that they have. We're then going to transform the data, and we're going to deliver an SFTP delivery of a flat file to our employee management partner, and that's going to let them know about what employees have what benefits, so they can help with our payroll processes and things like that. Now, how this is going to work is in the first demo, we're going to look at Logic Apps with log analytics. So over here on our Logic app, we'll be configuring the diagnostics settings, which are going to write logs into log analytics, and then our support person over here is going to use the business applications in Serverless 360 to be able to use that log data to provide support for the solution. In the second demo, we're going to have exactly the same scenario, but this time I'm going to do some work in my Logic apps to send BAM events to the business activity monitoring module of Serverless 360. And then our HR application super user over here can see, instead of having to wait for support to do anything in IT, they can actually see what's happening in the interfaces. They can participate in them and resubmit them, and we'll show how you get that extra maturity and extra added value features from BAM beyond just being able to see what's happening in the logs. So at this point, I'm now going to take over onto the screen and show what that would look like in both scenarios. Over here in the Azure portal, we've got two Logic apps. The first one, the schedule, just triggers the second Logic app. So if we take a look at this Logic app here, and we'll see that this one has a combination of both BAM and log analytics configured. So we'll have a look at BAM a bit later on, but you can see the key point is that we have the parse JSON. So here what I'm doing is I'm just parsing the file name, but what I actually do is behind the scenes in the settings, I'm setting a tracked property for the file name that we're going to process. So this will allow me to get custom properties into log analytics. And from here, we'll then go and call to get the employee data set. So we'll make an HTTP call, so that will be the success factors. We're then going to use this compose shape. Now in the real world, we probably would use a map and an integration account or something to create a flat file, but for demo purposes, I'm just going to compose that message, and then in this case, I'm going to save it to a blob container just to illustrate the file being delivered. Now, to set up log analytics, we go to the diagnostics settings and we configure, so we take a look at that, we'll configure to send logs to a log analytics workspace, and that'll allow us to be able to see the data in the logs. So how I can use that in Serverless 360, over here in my business applications, you can see I've got my employee daily benefits file here. So I've added the two Logic apps. I've configured, as an example, I've configured monitoring so that I can check the state, I can check for any failures. So they would be the standard sort of operator level monitoring where you want to know kind of, has there been any errors that we need to look at. We also would get things like the run history, which would be the standard Logic app kind of capabilities. But how do we know which file was processed by which Logic app, and how do we sort of make that a bit more alive? So this is where we can use the dashboards in Serverless 360, and you can see if we just change the time settings here to by hour for the last 7 days, for example, you see at the top I've got a dashboard widget based on the Azure metrics, but this widget down here is actually based on a log query. So in the sort of tree view here, you'll see I've got the log analytics namespace added to my business app. And what I can do is I've created a custom query where I can do a link across the events for the Logic app. So here I've got the file name, so I'm looking for that event where we do the parse JSON, which promotes that file name property, and then I'm linking to the workflow completed, so I get things like what the result of the Logic app was. And if we take a look at what that query looks like, so I'm just going to, so if we go and edit the widget here, we'll take a quick look at this query. So you can see it's a little bit of a complex query because we're doing a join here. So I'm getting the started events. I'm looking in the Azure diagnostic logs for this workflow, for this action. And this is where I'm going to promote the file name track property. And then I'm going to look for the workflow completed events. So you'll see here we're looking for workflow completed. So we find the event that relates to that workflow finishing. And down here we basically do a join between those two on the run ID. And that'll kind of give us this widget here where it shows a list of the actual files we've processed. Now, what we can do from there, so we get a list of the events that have been processed for our support operator. They can go through and see, what's been happening. We could even put some custom queries in this namespace here, so we could write a query. Let's take a copy of that query for a minute. So I could choose to run this query. I could save it if I want. If I'm the developer, I want to save this query so the support operator can come and find my Logic app runs later on. Works really well. And also I can do some monitoring for the query. So as well as monitoring the Logic app counters and run history, we can also do a query here where I can say, using those started events, if we've had any that fail in the last hour, then we can raise an error kind of thing. So we can use those log queries to drive some of the monitoring as well. So that'll give us quite a good experience for being able to kind of let the support operator see what's going on. Now the challenge with this is this is really focused around the support operator, and we're in the business application module, which is intended for IT support people. So next, if we go and take a look at BAM, so here in the Logic app, I can go and add some shapes to tell the business activity monitoring what's going on inside this Logic app or this end-to-end process. So in this case, it's really about a single Logic app, but it could be a more complex process potentially spanning multiple Logic apps or asynchronous processing when files come back later on, and that kind of more complex scenario. But here what I would do is I'd use the connector to do a start transaction. So you can see here I'm sending some data about what's going on in the Logic app, what the file name is, and I'm saying that this has started. I've then got a checkpoint to say, look, we got the data from SuccessFactors. I can even include what the data looked like if I wanted to, and then I can say further down that the process was complete and here's the file name. Now, in our business activity monitoring module, so if we go and change over to BAM, we can go into our human resources process and we can have a look at the employee benefits process. So what I'm doing here is, instead of it being just buried away inside a business application aimed at the support person, here we can create this business function process view where, here we've got the support people in the HR team who might do initial troubleshooting of any HR related processes. So if they've got an employee who's a new hire, who their benefits haven't been set up, the first thing they may do before raising a support ticket, they can go and check the benefits process and say, look, did our file run today? So they can go and see each file that's been sent across, and they may see there was an error, or there was some kind of, maybe it just hasn't ran yet and it runs in an hour's time. So you can deal with that initial triage troubleshooting just by letting that user see what happens in BAM. And then what they could maybe do, if they click a process here, they can see the steps that it's gone through. So it may still be in process, would be one example. If it was a long running process, they can see, some of the data about the Logic app that triggered. It may even be a function or an API even. You could see a message body. So in this case, I've got an empty one, but I think if I have a look in the second step, I think we showed the, kind of the data that had been published. This is just a dummy data set from the Mockaroo API. In this case, you can see what the data might actually look like. Now, so what I'm doing here is I'm giving the business super user the ability to visualize what's actually happening. So they can go and track and trace through the BAM tracking module. They can do things like, let's say there was a problem with this file, and there was some, maybe the problems that the new hire hadn't been set up properly. So they could spot that in the error message here. If, let's say, if this shape was red, they could see there was an error. They could go and fix the data, and then they might go, right, let's reprocess this. And you can configure a number of ways you can reprocess. So maybe an HTTP endpoint would push back to a Logic app, maybe a queue or an FTP or something like that. So I would just confirm reprocessing. That would send that process to rerun, and then we would be able to have the user self-service, and they would see that their process is running. So we should see that starting to run there now. So we're reprocessing today's file. We can see a little indicator down here that the one that was previous has been reprocessed, and we'll just let that run through. Now, with BAM, so before we had some log queries where we can visualize what's going on, but with BAM we can take it further. So in addition to just tracking, we've also got dashboard capability, so we can see what processes we've got. In employee benefits, there may be more than just this one Logic app. There may be other processes involved that you want to group together. Regardless of how they're implemented, they can be managed together. We've got the transaction designer over here, where you configure, a simplistic view of that complicated Logic app potentially. You can create multiple transactions. You configure the reprocessing here. So this would be kind of set up during the development phase. You would configure what this tracking profile would look like, so that when the data is sent to BAM, it would be visualized for the HR person. Now, the final step in the monitoring area is this is where we can do a number of different types of monitoring. So first off, we've got duration monitoring. So down here, I've configured that my daily benefits file. Let's imagine it's a long-running process. If it takes more than 10 minutes, I'd raise a warning. And here, if it takes more than 20 minutes, I'd raise an error. So that's a way of spotting a potential problem before it happens. You can, troubleshoot either the duration of a transaction or an individual stage within it. You can also configure notes here. So if you get an alert triggers, you can have some advice on what people might want to do if this kind of metric triggers the alert. Next up, we've got exception monitoring. So if you have an error in a process, you can configure policies for how often you would trigger an alert. So you may want to trigger, maybe one email an hour if there's an error, or you may want to trigger an alert on every single error. You've got a number of choices there. And then finally, you've got query monitoring. So here I can say, with this monitoring query, I've set up that every 48 hours, we should see at least 2 files. So if we see, sorry, I've got my alert the wrong way around. So if we see less than 2 files in a 48-hour period, then that might be a warning. And if we've got less than 1, that might be an error. So we can raise alerts if things haven't happened. So, for example, for some reason the process didn't run, then that would trigger an alert because we're not seeing the expected business outcomes from that. So that's how business activity monitoring can add more advanced, mature features on top of just basic logs. Thanks for listening to today's video. We hope you enjoyed taking a look at the differences between business activity monitoring and the logs in Azure Log Analytics, and how they can be used to help you support a Logic app. We think it's entirely feasible that you might use both capabilities depending on the types of logging that you're doing and the types of use cases and user scenarios that you might want to have for business users, self-service, support operators, and creating that great Azure experience. If you'd like to know more about this feature, please get in touch and we can arrange a demo and a trial so you can try this out yourself. Thank you very much.